Hey everyone, this is At the Letters for Saturday, March 26, 2022. As you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, Arden, Zwelling, and I are in the same spot for the first time actually in a long time. We are here in Florida. Not sure how much you can tell, but we are outside Clearwater Hotel. Very nice out. Good to be outside. Good to be talking some baseball. Arden, we've got a lot to get to. But it's good to be talking baseball. It's good to be in the same spot talking baseball. I mean, we've done that off mic many times in the course of the last couple of years, but here we are in Florida for ATL.
You're here, man. I have never been happier to see you here to work the last week. Every day for the last week, I wake up and I'm like, I'm going to write a normal spring training story today. I'm going to write about this guy's like new pitch or that guy's swing change or so-and-so's in the best shape of their life. And inevitably this week, every day by about 10:30 a.m., it has gone completely to hell.
Well, it's kind of wild because we spoke a few days ago, and at that point, the Blue Jays had already made the Matt Chapman move, but they had not acquired Raimel Tapia. Pete Walker had not been arrested and charged for DUI. They had not announced plans for a Rogers Center renovation. Yeah. I'm sure I'm missing some stuff in there, but it's been actually a wild few days even since then. So, I mean, you started this week of your stretch of coverage of spring training. It was pretty busy. And then since then, there has been activity basically every single day.
The contract renewals of Bo Bichette and Alek Manoah, which was like, it's a big thing in the industry. I don't know, some fans maybe don't like necessarily appreciate that. Pretty big thing that happened there. Bo Bichette came out and spoke against the Blue Jays formula for pre-arbitration salaries. Pretty significant thing as well. We had a media tour of the new PDC in there, which I don't know. I think Hazel's got something on that coming out this weekend on Blue Jays Central. So people are going to see that. But yeah, we toured the PDC. It's just been nonstop, dude.
So, all right. So where to start? I mean, I think probably the elephant in the room here is the Pete Walker DUI. I think probably we can get to the Tapia trade, of course, talk some actual baseball, talk, about what else you've seen, different players who have stood out to you. But why don't we begin with the Pete Walker DUI? As we sit here right now, this is Saturday evening. So less than 24 hours ago, Pete Walker, the Blue Jays pitching coach, was pulled over. He was driving, according to Pinella's. Why don't you tell us the details? Because you've been reporting on this. So what do you got on Pete Walker?
I've been talking to the sheriff's office all day.
You've been talking literally to the sheriff's office.
Yeah, that all day, it's 9:30 p.m. right now. My day started at 7:30 a.m. So let's try to remember all this. According to the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department, Pete Walker, he was arrested and booked a little bit after 12 a.m. on Friday morning, Thursday night, allegedly going 82 in a 45, and that's miles per hour. So kilometers per hour, that's like 130 in a 70, something like
really fast, way too fast,
something along those lines. Yes. And then according to the affidavit, which I acquired, and according to the deputy who arrested him, Pete Walker failed several field sobriety tests, blurry bloodshot eyes. He refused a breathalyzer. Apparently, according to the arrest report, breath smelled of alcohol. And he was arrested, charged, booked, released around like 9:15 a.m. on Friday. So reported that all day. Spoke to Pete Walker after the game. I mean, spoke to is generous. Listened to a statement from Pete Walker after the game, in which, he said that he admitted that he was involved in an incident, apologized to the Blue Jays, to the fans, to his family. The official line from everybody in the organization, Charlie Montoyo, people had contacted the organization, etc. It's just been, we're still gathering information. Not much more to say right now.
And, of course, we weren't there. This has not led to a conviction as of yet. But if this is the way it unfolded, then extremely reckless, put himself in danger, put others in danger. Yeah, there's just no condoning that.
It's disappointing. Yeah. Right? It really is, because there's put aside the fact that it's 2022 and we've all got a little computer in our pocket that will call you a ride, and put aside the fact that he's well compensated and can afford to put all of that aside. I don't care what year it is.
Yeah.
Don't drink and drive. You are putting yourself and those around you in danger. It's really stupid and reckless. And yeah, if Pete Walker is convicted of this, really disappointing because, like, let's be forthright. You and I both know Pete Walker really well.
Yeah.
We interact with him during the season on a near daily basis, several times a week. We've gotten to know him personally.
Yeah. He's been
really
on this podcast
Yeah. You know,
at least once.
So really, really disappointing. I don't know what else to say about it than that.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I find it personally disappointing. I think it's objectively disappointing. I don't have a ton more to say.
You're a leader in the organization too,
Yeah.
is the other thing, right? Like, not that it would be excusable if he was, you know, and by the way, every spring, unfortunately, it seems like this happens at a camp somewhere across MLB often, right? Like it is, you know, really disappointing that that's been the case. He's not the first MLB affiliated person to catch a DUI in Arizona or Florida at this time of year. But yeah, even if you are like 20-year-old prospect or whatever, it's completely inexcusable. Yeah, Pete Walker should be a leader in this organization. And he should be someone who's setting the standard for young people in this organization as well. Like the other thing I would say, like, I know people are, you know, they probably don't love the like vague milquetoast statements that people make after this, right? Pete Walker came out like he wasn't taking questions from us. I, you know, pushed Charlie with some questions, but he wasn't having it. He was just wanted to say the same thing over and over again. But like Pete in particular was just going to make a statement and move on. And I'm sure people are disappointed in the statement and wish they'd said more, but the man's involved in an ongoing legal matter. For him, there's absolutely nothing to be gained from even saying anything at all. Really, like the fact he even came out and stood in front of the camera, like he could have hid and released a statement through the club that was even more milquetoast probably because he wouldn't have been saying it in front of a camera with lights. Like it just would have been manicured from whichever PR person put it together for him, right? So he actually came out and said that. And like I do think that you can be really upset about what he did or is alleged to have done, I should say. You could be really upset about what he's alleged to have done and really disappointed. But you can also be empathetic to the situation he's in, the fact he's in an ongoing legal matter, and there is supposed to be a presumption of innocence. So I think you can be upset and empathetic at the same time. I don't think those things are mutually exclusive.
True. I mean, he's been charged. He's been arrested. And yeah, I think the problem is not with the statement. The problem is with the actions, whatever those are. But I guess on a practical level, he was with the team Saturday.
Today,
correct?
Yeah. He's been with the team since. I've seen him in the clubhouse since. He's been with the team.
Yeah.
Working.
The plans were too, as I understand it, based on, you know, what you've reported and what, you know, some of the information that Jays have shared, that he would continue to be working with the team.
That's what Charlie said today. Yeah, I haven't heard anything to the contrary. I haven't heard anything about discipline. I've asked the Jays officially. I asked Charlie. No word on any discipline. I suspect there won't be any. Like, my personal opinion is that there would be grounds for a suspension here. I do not think he should lose his job, but I do think there's grounds for a suspension without pay. Look, MLB's aware of it and have been aware of it, you know, since the Blue Jays were. So I don't know if there's any action coming from them. You know, this is a long way off, but if Pete Walker were convicted, there could be an issue with getting into Canada. Right. And there are ways around that. Like there are exemptions to that where you can apply to be like a rehabilitated individual. And that's if you can convince the border that I'm not likely to commit another crime. It was a one-time thing type of deal. You can also get like a temporary visitor's visa permit or whatever they call it. And that's another way around it. There's ways around this, you know, and there are people who have been convicted of crimes in MLB who have entered Canada and played. So there's ways around it, but that is another layer to this, but that's a long ways off because Pete Walker's not been convicted of anything. He's merely been charged. For sure. Anything else on Pete? I think that about does it.
Okay, let's leave it there. We'll come back with more.
We talk about baseball.
Yeah, next on At the Letters, we'll get to the baseball part of the discussion. We are back on At the Letters. Should say as well, huge thanks to our producers here on the scene with us, Amal Delich and Nick Andrade. They're doing great work. You will see it throughout the week. We got more coming. as our At the Letters Florida tour continues here. Just getting started here. But, Arden, the Jays, since we last spoke, I mean, the transactions continue. And, as you and me and Shai have kind of been texting about this at times, we've remarked at various points how it's almost like the second week of December and the third week of spring training, or the second week of spring training at once. Like, it's happening concurrently. So, there's this Grichuk for Tapia trade. Yeah. What do you make of it?
It's interesting, right? Like, I don't know that you could have found somebody who is more different than Randall Grichuk and Raimel Tapia. We think about Grichuk as like, big pop, fly ball hitter, low OBP. I mean, he's got some speed, but not incredible speed. Tapia is like not a ton of pop, although like, I don't know, hits the ball pretty hard, but like, not a big power hitter.
Yep.
Hits the ball into the ground a lot, ton of speed. Lefty, Grichuk righty, obviously. Tapia's had better on base numbers. It's interesting to me.
They're basically total opposites.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I think from a baseball standpoint, like, set the money aside, I think, because Grichuk makes more of it. There was some cash sent to Colorado to kind of even that side of things.
And to get the prospect, too, I think.
And they got a prospect.
I think the money gets you the DSL MVP as well.
Exactly. So that's another interesting wrinkle. But even if you just look at the two major leaguers, you got Grichuk and you've got Tapia. And to me, if I'm the Colorado Rockies, I would much rather have Randall Grichuk. Like, I think the Rockies did a good job in this trade because he'll play every day.
It's not something you say often. I think the Rockies did a good job on this trade.
It might be a first in ATL history, but I really do. Like, Grichuk honestly might hit 38 homers and like slug 540, and he's never going to be a huge average on base guy, but that's fine. So that can be a good move for them, and it can also be a good move for the Toronto Blue Jays, who now acquire a player who's better suited to their roster. I mean, Tapia just hammers the ball into the ground, like super tall and lanky, really different physique and really different swing profile and offensive profile than what you're going to get from a lot of the Blue Jays players. But, he kind of reminds me of like a tall and lanky Dominican Ben Revere. And Ben Revere was like a good player for this Blue Jays team the last time they were really good. People loved Ben Revere. And probably they probably loved him more than they kind of should have for how good he was.
They saw like the best 2 months of his career though, right?
Him and Go, like a lot of guys on that team,
right?
Actually.
It's just like they saw the worst month of Jonathan Villar's career.
Yes.
Blue Jays fans saw the best 2 months of Ben Revere's career.
They did. And so I'm not promising Blue Jays fans Ben Revere levels because, he did play great in Toronto in 2015. But I think that Tapia can be really useful. I think as a bench player, I certainly don't think you want to give him 500 at-bats in the American League East. But as a bench player who starts in left when Lourdes is DHing, starts in center when Springer's DHing, he can pinch run for you. He can pinch hit for Danny Jansen. I think there's value there. Like, I like this trade for the Jays.
So don't forget to take us back to Grichuk, because I want to like kind of tie a bow on the Grichuk era. But you remind me of something with Tapia. I don't know. Did you read? Actually, don't answer if you read what I wrote.
Yeah,
but
I did.
Did you? All right. So did you see some of the numbers with Tapia?
The 67% ground ball rate.
So like, it's crazy. Yeah. It's insane. It's actually like it's borderline historic. Some of the numbers that
like since 2001 or something.
Since 2001, the highest single season ground ball rate.
Yeah,
and it's nearly 70%, and it's not a small sample. It's a substantial full season sample. Like, so when this trade happened, right? Like, I was like, all right, I don't know Tapia's numbers like front to back as a Blue Jays reporter, right? So I'm like, let me just, dig in on some of these, pull up Fangraphs, pull up Savant. And I was looking at them like, is this an error? Has there been like a, clerical error here? Is this a typo? His launch angle is negative 4.4 last season
into the ground,
which is quite literally like into the ground. Negative 4.4. Remember when we were talking about Vladdy's launch angle and it was like, super low, but it was like 7 to 10 or something.
Yeah.
Negative 4.4, dude. I wish I had it in front of me, but it's like over the last 6 seasons, there have been maybe 7 guys who had a negative launch angle. Like, read it in my story, it's in there. Like, maybe 7 guys who had a negative launch angle at all, and like 2 of them are pitchers, and none of them had the sample that Tapia did. But then the flip side of this is that if you go on Savant, you will see that he's like a 70th percentile max exit velo guy.
Weird.
Like, hits the ball as hard as the top 30% of hitters in baseball. And then you look at his average home run distance. Look up this guy's homers last year. He hit like only 6, but he friggin' parked these things. Like, these things are gone. He has the same average home run distance in 2021 as Giancarlo Stanton.
Yeah.
He has a higher average home run distance than Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who we all watched hit like absolute missiles out of minor league parks last year.
Yeah.
It's so strange, and I wonder if like the Blue Jays see something in there where they're like, we can get this guy off the ground, get him in the air a bit more often, tapping into that exit velo a bit more. But then it's like, oh, hey, you know who hit the ball in the air with pretty good exit velo? Randall friggin' Grichuk. Maybe you should trade for that guy if that's what you want. So, like, is this guy's game not predicated on the ground ball and using his legs to beat the defense to first base, like, and making contact? Because if he starts trying to get the ball in the air a bit more and, like, make harder contact in the air, he's probably going to swing and miss a bit more, right?
Exactly. And right now he's a really tough guy to strike out. Like, I think it's 13%, something like that. Really low strikeout rate. League average 25%, something like that. So he's half of that.
Yeah.
And to me, like, and yeah, you outlined it within the piece for sure. But like,
it's so strange.
let him do his thing. Is like he's
his thing is so strange. His thing is like, I hit ground balls 70% of the time, and I hit them straight into the ground.
But it's almost like, you know, like some relievers are just specialists, right? And like they're loogies, or they're slop innings eaters, like the Sam Gavilios,
or they're like the guy that throws like 80% curveballs or something like that, right?
And so Tapia is just the hitter version of that.
Yeah.
He's just the hitter version of someone who does really specific things. And there would be matchups for him, like especially against some lefties, or, if you need a 3-run homer, your anomalous home runs aside, like that's not the guy you want at the plate. And with the trade of Grichuk, the Jays actually kind of have an absence of power on their bench right now, depending on what you think of Greg Bird. So, to me, he serves a purpose. He actually serves multiple purposes. And my question with this, and I don't know if you've had the chance to see him yet, or even if he's appeared in games.
I talked to him today. He's going to play on Sunday, and tonight's Saturday.
Right. So he'll be playing soon. But I'm curious to know how well he can play center field, because I just have this suspicion, like the Rockies didn't play him in center very much. And I just had this suspicion that if he was a really good center fielder, they would have played him there.
So he grew up playing center field, played it through the minors, hasn't played much in the majors. Asked him about that today. He said, playing center field to me is like eating rice and beans in my house. And as you said, Dominican lad. So rice and beans, a staple in the Tapia household, I'm sure. So yeah, we're going to find out. You know what I want to know from you? Do you think the Blue Jays got better in this trade? Yeah, because they just have a more useful bench piece than Grichuk was going to be.
Well, like, I think Randall Grichuk starting outfielder is better than Raimel Tapia starting outfielder,
right,
which is why I think the Rockies won.
Yeah.
But I think Raimel Tapia, bench player on a team with a lot of right-handed power, which is where he is better than Randall Grichuk, bench player on a team with a lot of right-handed power.
It is really a mutually beneficial deal. That's a good way to get back to Grichuk, actually. Like, it's beneficial for the Rockies, I agree. Beneficial for the Blue Jays. Beneficial for Randall Grichuk.
Oh, yeah.
Randall Grichuk was not stoked about what his playing time was going to be this year. He made the organization aware of that. Like, he had a number of conversations with the front office about it. He's not a guy who does well looking over his shoulder, wondering about when his playing time's going to come. He's not a guy who does well with inconsistent plate appearances. Like, he's a guy who just kind of needs that regular playing time and that rhythm to be his best, I think, in MLB. So he's going to get that in Colorado. So it is really beneficial for him. Like, I am by no means suggesting that he asked for a trade, but I do think that he, as counterintuitive as it might sound for someone to be, welcoming of leaving a World Series contender like the Blue Jays. Like, I do think he is going to appreciate his situation more. And I don't think that he loved the situation, like the role that he was looking at for 2022 with the Blue Jays.
Yeah, we might have to make his home run total an over/under as an honorary throwback, even as a non-Blue Jay.
34.5.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, that's
somewhere like that.
Probably fair.
35.5.
So that's. I mean, I think that's a move that should help the Jays.
Let me ask you this too. Do you think that the Randall Grichuk deal, that the Blue Jays, the extension, was that a mistake?
I mean, as with anything, it's like, what do you know at the time? At the time, they had almost nothing on the books, like almost nothing. And, the hope was that he could be better than he ended up being. I don't think it worked. I don't think it was a mistake. Like, I don't think it was a colossal mistake. In the sense that if you have nothing on the books and you have a decent outfielder and you lock him in, all right. I mean, that's fine. I'm not going to hammer them for that, but I don't think it really worked. So I don't know if you would land differently.
I don't think it worked as intended.
Yeah.
I think the Blue Jays thought he'd be better than he was for them. But I don't think it was a colossal mistake. I agree with you in that, like, it didn't stop them from doing anything.
No.
This front office is, their worst moves, right? You think about like Tanner Roark,
Kendrys Morales,
Shun Yamaguchi. It hasn't stopped them from doing anything. And it hasn't left them with these like albatross, like Chris Davis situations. Like, they haven't really had anything like that. So I don't, if I was grading it, I wouldn't give it a good grade, but I also don't think that it was like a calamity if those two things can both be true,
I think they can. I think that that it gave them something. It gave them something, and he was a part of a very good team in 2021, and a decent team in 2020. So that production helped them.
And I think he brought some things behind the scenes too, in terms of, from a culture perspective. I think in the clubhouse, I think that he was a strong leader for, a lot of young guys, Bo Bichette and others, as they kind of graduated in the majors. He was a guy who's like, you would hear this from people, his effort level was like the most consistent of anyone's, no matter what, like the scoreboard read. It's 12-0. If it's 1-1, if it's the first inning, it's the ninth inning. It's a hot ass day in August. If it's the last week of the season and you're out of it, if it's opening day, like his effort level is just consistent in all facets of the game, right? Like running out ground balls, like first to third on a 2-out fly ball that's going to be caught. Like those type of things the players can take off. He didn't take them off, so I do think that does matter a little bit, even though that's not something you're going to find on his Fangraphs page.
100%. Now, I do want to get to Bo Bichette here. You wrote another interesting piece about him. Hopefully, we get the chance to touch on some Rogers Center renovations as well, because those are coming down the pipeline. But as we're kind of discussing the off-season aspect of this, and Tapia and Grichuk and Matt Chapman, of course, their offseason seems to be wrapped up now. I mean, Jose Ramirez, I just don't see that happening right now. You see a report today on Saturday that Ketel Marte is discussing an extension with the Diamondbacks. Make of that what you will.
I didn't see that. Interesting.
Yeah, I thought, Jays fans, I thought that's the kind of news that could impact things. Whether that leads anywhere, who knows? So their team is probably mostly set. They've got the roster in place. They made their big moves. Going into this offseason, they wanted to make the team better than the 91-win team. And Mark Shapiro, I believe, says that he thinks it is better. What do you think? Is it better than the team that ended last year? Is it better than the team that played for the entirety of 2021? How does it compare?
I think it's better with a full season of Jose Barrios. And if we can assume a full season of George Springer, which
Manoah?
Sorry?
Alek Manoah?
And a full season Alek Manoah. So I don't know how, because somebody inevitably is going to get hurt, right? Somebody's going to miss a few months. So what the Blue Jays went through with Springer last year, what are the odds everybody's just perfectly healthy the entire season? Somebody important's probably going to get hurt. And the thing with this roster is pretty much everybody is pretty good. So you're losing a pretty good player. But I do think they're better just because of those reasons. Will Matt Chapman finish third in MVP voting? Probably not, right? That's pretty high standards. Is Kevin Gausman going to win the Cy Young Award? I mean, probably not, right? Pretty high standards. So, those are the replacements, obviously, for Simeon and for Ray. And the standard to match them is like so unreachable.
Yeah.
It's insane. But I think just full season Springer, full season Barrios, full season Manoah, those things are what, to me, pushes them above a 91 win projected team at this time.
Yeah, I think they're going to win more than 91 games. I think the team that ended last season was better than a 91 win team. They were a playoff team at the end of last year.
That's what I also should have mentioned. And a team that gets to play all of its home games in Toronto. That's another thing that I think is there's, I don't know how to quantify it, but there's a gain in wins from that reality.
Well, and it could, we could see with the news now that Aaron Judge will be able to play in New York regardless of vaccination status.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he just rides it out for those 10 games in Toronto. So maybe it does become a home field advantage for the Blue Jays. But
don't call it a competitive disadvantage for the opponents. Just don't say that.
We're not going there. We're not going there.
You're down here now. Mark will find you. Don't say that.
We're not going there. But yeah, I think so. Last year at the end of the season, they had a great team. It could have done a lot of damage if they had gotten to the playoffs. Didn't happen. I think the team now is as good. I don't think it's necessarily better because they lost Semyon and Ray. I think it's as good, and I think they're going to win more than 91 games this year. I think they're going to win more like 93 to 95. But that's we can pin down those projections later.
Like the bullpen's probably better to start the season too than it was last year. As much as one can even predict a bullpen, like I'm even hesitant to say like the bullpen's good, right? Who knows? But I do think, and also like having 28 roster spots will benefit this team in a pretty big way. Because like your 28th man that you're carrying isn't going to be Sam Gaviglio or Buddy Boshears. Like it might be Nate Pearson, like it might be a really useful arm.
Yeah.
Like it's not, the Blue Jays 40 man is like pretty deep. I think we were talking about this last time around, right? Like where they're, every time they make a 40 man decision now, it is actually kind of difficult because the players at the edges of their 40 are pretty good. So that means that when you get 28 major league roster spots, that extra player that you're bringing is a pretty good one.
Yep.
Like it's a pretty good guy who could over a full season, like put up a decent WAR. So I think that benefits them as well.
Yeah, it's a good team. Like to me, there is still room for power off the bench. I think ideally lefty power off the bench. Like Tapia fills a nice role. I still think
Bird, baby.
Yeah, maybe he is. And
right.
You know what? There's nothing wrong with letting Greg Bird have a roster spot for 3 weeks and see. And if it works for 2 months, great. And if it's still working in July, even better. But if not, okay, you trade for someone, you sign someone because those guys will be available. So I still think there's room for a lefty power bat. I still think there's room for more relief. Yimi Garcia, all right, we'll see. But I'm not totally sold that this bullpen is just done and set. But look, that's nitpicking. This team is really good.
Yeah, I like a bullpen's always a living, breathing thing throughout the year anyway, right? You're optioning guys, you're calling guys up. You get surprises. Tim Meza was a surprise last year, right? Nobody expected him to be what he was. There'll be a surprise this year. And there'll be guys who come in off waivers. There'll be little Simber and Richards trades along the way. Yep. You'll go pick up this year's Brad Hand and hope to do a lot better than he did in this year's, Joaquin Soria. And like you will, the bullpen will change throughout the year. So it's even hard to say, to sit here right now and say, oh, this team's got a good bullpen. Like we don't even know who's going to be in it in July.
True.
So it's hard to say.
All right. So as we said, we got a lot more at the letters coming everyone's way. We've got some interviews planned, so look forward to that. But, before we wrap up here, there are a couple more things to touch on because, it's been pretty wild.
This week,
here.
buddy.
It's been
busy week.
I'm curious as to how things are going to unfold.
Oh, no. Now that you're here, it'll be just spring training dead zone.
Yeah.
Dude, I came in so ambitious, like all these interesting ideas I wanted to do and all these, like I said, typical spring training stories. I did a couple of them. Like people could really raise my spirits by reading what I wrote about Kevin Gosman's blisters or like reading what I wrote about Yusei Kikuchi's adjustments.
Yeah.
Because those things just got lost in the news cycle, but were like interesting stories to me. But yeah, I had like totally ambitious spring training goals, writing interesting stories about interesting players. And it's just been every day there's been like a big news story that has completely eliminated the possibility of doing that.
Well, the more I think about it, the more it really is kind of like the winter meetings and spring training at the same time. And like that's just an absurd combination. So yeah, you and Shai have done some great work. That's been great to see. Now, who knows? Maybe it'll be quiet. Maybe I'll just be, on the beach after. I doubt it. I think these spring training days are pretty long. It's great. It's great to be here. We are.
You always get that comment, when people hear you coming down. They're like, "Oh, you must be kicking it at the beach." I haven't seen a beach, dude. I see a beach from my car at 7:20 in the morning as I'm driving to the ballpark, and it's still dark.
Yeah.
That's what I see.
It's
as close to the beach as I get.
That's right. Very long days. I'm very happy to be here. I can't speak for Arden after the week.
Oh no, I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah.
What I said in the last podcast was completely genuine. Like, I love being here. This
Yeah.
is the best, greatest assignment, and I do really enjoy the work that I produce here. Even when it is about stuff, let me tee you up for your next topic, like contract renewals.
Exactly.
Which is I understand dry and heavy to a lot of people, but that was a really interesting story to do, and I was pretty happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a different story. So why don't you take us behind the scenes on this one as to how it came together, because it's not something you see with every player every year.
So I don't know, is there an easy way to explain the pre-arb contract renewal process? Essentially, when you're 0 to 3 service time before you qualify for arbitration, your team just unilaterally can decide what you earn. And they could give you the minimum if they wanted to, right? They could renew you at the minimum. Most teams have a formula or a system for how they sort of issue raises. If you haven't played in the big leagues, you're getting the minimum. If you're Hagen Danner or whatever, you're getting the minimum, right? If you're that 40-man guy, you're getting the minimum. But if you're in your second year, like Alec Manoah, your third, Bo Bichette, you get a little bump. And the Blue Jays have a system, a formula for that. And they've shared it with players. They've shared it with their representatives. I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it. And it's basically based off of there is an easy way to explain it. I wanted to do it quick and I won't. Yeah. But there's a little, you get a little multiplier for active service in prior seasons, minus IL time, by the way. You get a little multiplier for each, plate appearance, and for pitchers, each innings pitched, which is based off of a points system that's even more calculated or complicated, but is meant to compensate for the way pitchers are used these days. Anyway, it's all to say, you can basically, as a Blue Jays player, earn a maximum of a $40,000 raise on the league minimum, plus awards bonuses if you're an all-star or you qualify for, you win a Cy Young or an MVP or something like that. Go read the piece. It's all in there. Shai DeV's reported on this. It's all in there. Anyway, came to, as you said, during the offseason, during the spring training, came to contract renewal time. And so the Blue Jays pre-arb class, it's 13 players or something like that. All of them but 2 accepted what the formula produced for them, led by Jordan Romano, I think, who had the biggest one. They all accepted it, except for Bo Bichette and Alec Manoah. And so I'm sure, when that was announced, I'm sure your eyebrow was raised. Yeah. My eyebrow was absolutely raised. Clearly, Shai DeV's was as well, because he wrote about it. And then, kind of, caught word that Bo might have something to say about it. So went to talk to Bo about it, and he did have something to say about it. He said, I disagree with the formula that the Blue Jays use. I don't think that's the way players should be valued. I think players bring more to the club than this formula is accounting for. I believe I'm an outlier. Paraphrasing, but that's essentially what Bo said. I believe I'm an outlier. Hard to argue with him when
he had an incredible season.
Led the American League in hits. I had the comp in my story. Him and A-Rod are the only guys at his age who have had seasons like that as a shortstop. Very few players have had age 23 seasons. Very few players, period. Forget just shortstops, period. Have had age 23 seasons like Bo Bichette just had. It's pretty outlier-ish. And then you factor in the fact that he is a face of this franchise. He is somebody that they sell tons of merchandise for. He is somebody that they market. He's in all their ads. He's on the Jumbotron. He's on banners around the city. There's some sort of a value to that as well. And then, you also layer in the fact Bo Bichette knows what's going on.
Yeah.
Bo Bichette, pretty involved in the CBA process over the offseason, asking a lot of questions, knew what was going on. Obviously, his old man knows what's going on, comes from a big league family. Baseball is the family business. So there's also that. So by him saying what he said and declining his renewal salary, thereby accepting another salary that's like $23,000 less. He sent a pretty direct message to the Blue Jays about being, pretty unhappy with the way he's been treated through this process. And he also indicated to them that I am going to be like, I'm going to be fighting for my value every step of the way going forward.
Yeah. And this is where it's really interesting. And you get through this, the numbers and the whole system. At the end of the day, Bo Bichette said, no, I'm not taking that number, knowing that it would lead to $23,000 less in his bank account. And for most people, that's a lot of money. Even for Bo Bichette, he still hasn't signed that first huge deal. I'm sure he would like to have the $23,000, but more important than that was making a statement internally. And then he was very, at least from what we saw in your piece, the public comments that he made, very guarded. He was not stepping over any lines. He was cautious and deliberate in what he was saying, but that was a $23,000 statement that he was making.
Absolutely. And Alek Manoah made a $6,000 statement as well. And I think the idea is that you sacrifice a little bit of money now to potentially make more money down the line. Because look, Bo Bichette is going to qualify for arbitration next year. Alek Manoah, we'll see. I'd imagine he'll be a Super 2. We'll see. Came up beginning of May, so he's got a pretty good chance to be a Super 2. So that would make him ARB eligible in 2 winters from now. Looking like there's going to be negotiations on contracts to try to avoid arbitration. See how those go. I think Vladdy's was a pretty difficult negotiation, which ended up at $7.9 million for him in his first trip through. Very interesting position for him. This is a guy who could come pretty close to or surpass arbitration records as we go forward. But yeah, Bo Bichette's going to go through that process next year. You're going to have a negotiation there. And then if you go to a hearing, the club is going to have to make an argument. Bo's going to have to make an argument. And I think that from the player's perspective, you don't want to give the club any leverage of being able to say that this player has been very happy with what we have paid him. And it's a small piece of leverage, and it's not a convincing argument, because I think that just on the surface, it's very obvious that Bo Bichette and Alek Manoah are dramatically underpaid relative to their production. But the club could make that argument that they were happy with what they paid them because they accepted those offers in an arbitration setting. They could make that argument. So as the player, by not accepting that, you do remove that very small shred of leverage from the club. Florida men are being Florida men somewhere right now, I think.
Well, let's hope everyone's okay.
What do you think about that?
Well, okay. So here's what I was going to say before the siren went past there is this. One way to avoid going to an arbitration hearing with Bo Bichette is to sign him to an extension next week. And Vlad Jr. too. The way around it is simple. We know what it would take to sign these guys broadly.
Probably about 9 figures, and the first figure is a 3.
Yeah.
Right?
Massive amounts of money. Bo Bichette, he kind of laid his cards on the table last year when some, I think might have been me. I think it was me. I asked him about Fernando Tatis Jr. In his extension. And he was like, yeah, Fernando's underpaid, but, it's still a good deal for him. And that's $340 million. And that was before Bo Bichette had the season that he did. So he knows the value of a star player, and he knows that he is a star player. And so it's not going to come cheap. And same with Vlad. So that's fine. But this is prime time. Last 2 weeks of spring.
What did you make of it? What are your thoughts?
Of Bo?
Yeah, of the renewals. Of them turning it down. What do you think of kind of the message they sent?
Yeah, I think it's a marker in the ground. They're saying, look, this is not the way that I value myself. And they're saying, I want to be treated fairly, and I'm going to insist on being treated fairly. So that's, if you just want to put your head down and play baseball, and you're just ever so grateful to the owners of the game for letting you put a uniform on, then you probably just go out there and accept the renewal. But if you see your value and the part that you bring and the part that you do that is different and better than other people, then you see guys like Bo and Alec Manoah doing what they did.
Well, and they're uniquely positioned to do it as well, in that, Bo, I think, grew up in a pretty privileged surrounding just because of his father, obviously, but then signed a $1.1 million bonus out of high school. And Alec Manoah, first round pick out of West Virginia, signed for 4 point something. Was his bonus at, I think, a number 11 in the draft, the slot around there, like around 4.3, 4.5, something like that. So to Alec Manoah, what's $6,000 when you got $4 million in the bank, right? So I think, when he had that discussion with his agent, I think it came down to, I could take the $6,000 hit if this is going to be good for me in the future, if this is going to, set me up correctly now. What are you going to say?
Yeah, I mean, if you see it in I guess all walks of life probably, but certainly within the Players Association, you see the guys who have made a ton of money are just more willing to gamble. They're more willing to push it. They're more willing to make a stand like that. And that's where, you look at the vote, we're not going to pull everyone back into CBA talks here, but you look at who opposed accepting the current offer that's now in place and allowing for baseball to be happening. It was the executive subcommittee, the guys who have already made tens or hundreds of millions.
It's like people who say, like, leave, politics out of sports. Like, what do you mean? Politics is everything. People who say leave the CBA out of baseball now that it's done. No, the CBA is everything. Yeah. Everything that happens is the CBA. So everything relates back to it. So people are like, oh, we don't want to talk about this anymore. You're talking about it always when you're talking about baseball at all times. You talk about rules, you're talking about the CBA.
Even this podcast, right? We're talking about DUIs, trades. We're talking about renovations. We're talking about pre-arb renewals. And it's great to be talking baseball. It's great to be here in Florida and actually on the scene of it, but we're not talking. Well, I guess we talked about Tapia and his playing style, but there's so many layers to it.
Well, and so the other thing I want to say about, Bichette say disagrees with the formula. Yeah, I kind of disagree with the formula too, because who controls the levers that get pulled in that formula, right? The formula is based on, okay, what's your career active service time? Well, who decides when your service time begins as a player, and who decides how much time you spend in the big leagues as a player? The team. They decide when you're first promoted. They decide they hold options over you. Like, they can chuck you on the IL, and the IL time doesn't count towards service in the formula. And then it's plate appearances for hitters. Well, who decides how many plate appearances you get? The team. And then it's innings pitched for pitchers. Who decides how many innings pitched you get as a player? The team. The team controls all of the aspects of the formula. Nothing in the formula about home runs. Nothing in it about strikeouts, about ERA, right? As the player, the only way you can substantially control how much you get through the Blue Jays formula is by being an all-star, which a fair number of players get to be, but not everybody gets to be an all-star, or like MVP, Cy Young, which is like, okay, be one of literally the best players at the highest level of the game.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the only way you can control.
And that's
a
recent development too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So that, it's a pretty hard thing to do, to win an MVP, win a Cy Young, be an all-star.
It is. Now, okay, devil's advocate to that would be, this was collectively bargained. This was not handed on.
Not the Blue Jays formula was. Oh, you mean the pre-arb situation? Yeah.
So I mean,
that's always the argument, right?
Yeah. So
totally.
Yeah. But
and the other devil's advocate thing is the minimum salary this year is like $120K more than it was last year, or maybe a little bit more than that.
We
right?
went 570 to 700, so 130.
Yeah. Right. So, that's the other thing. But then also you can look at what's inflation been over the last 5 years. What have league revenues done over the last 5 years? What have minimum wages in other sports done over the last 5 years? Where are baseball's minimum wages now relative to other sports, right? Like, so that can cut the other direction as well, my friend.
It certainly can. Arden wrote about this in depth at Sportsnet. Check it out. So another one of your daily pieces this week took a look at the plans for renovations at Rogers Center. So my understanding here, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, because you were down here for the kind of whole discussion of it, but 10 to 15 year extension on the kind of viability of Rogers Center, which is already,
I think it's viable now.
Yeah.
Right?
it's viable. But
It's not like we need to renovate this thing in 2 years or it's going to collapse,
it's not the big O. But but by the end of that 15-year window, it'll be almost 50 years old. As a baseball facility.
It's 39 years old now, I think.
Yeah.
38, 39. Yeah.
It's getting up there. No, it was born. It was born. It was. It began in 1989. So that would be 32 or 3.
32 or 3?
Yeah.
All right. Long day.
Yes.
Hour 15 of my day right now.
That's right.
Of my work day. Continue.
That's right.
Anyway, Ben, they're going to rip out the entire lower bowl.
Yeah.
Like rip it right out.
Yeah.
So people who have those seats that don't look at the home plate are going to feel better.
Yeah.
There's certain seats where folks are like looking at the outfield.
Yeah.
Just because the way it's configured. So that's good. They're going to rip out the lower bowl. They're going to make it, in the words of Mark Shapiro, like feel like more of a ballpark than a stadium. I don't know what that entails yet. We're going to find out in May. They're going to do that. They're going to open up the concourses. It's going to be a big one. It's mostly going to be lower bowl. Shapiro did say like we're going to touch every aspect of the stadium, but I think that the most dramatic things could be lower bowl. Another like really dramatic upgrade is going to be something that fans aren't going to see at all, which is player facilities.
Right.
The Blue Jays want to kind of recreate what they have down here in Dunedin at the PDC, which is like friggin' spectacular.
Yeah.
Like I walked through it the other day and it is like unbelievable. They're going to try to recreate that in Toronto. I don't know, like from a spacing issue, I feel like I don't know where they're going to put all this stuff.
Not much room.
I think that, that's going to be huge for Blue Jays players in season. So right now you think about it, you got this brand new player development complex, which is like sick. And you got your pitching lab and your hitting lab, your force plates and your, hit tracks and all this stuff. But like you only have access to it 7 weeks a year.
Yeah.
Right. So if you get all that stuff installed at Rogers Center, I think it's going to be a big deal for players as well. I think that, they're going to have a brand new clubhouse. It's going to be a lot nicer, way better, eating and dining facilities, all that eating and dining as if those are different things. But, they're going to have way better like facilities just for working out, for recovery, for preparation. I'm sure they'll get a beautiful new video room and all that kind of stuff. So I think that, the Blue Jays feel that competitively there will be a benefit there as well to upgrading the player facilities.
Yeah, for sure. So how much money is going into this?
We don't know yet, but I mean, just thinking about the scale, and we'll find out in May, right? Which when this is all actually announced. But thinking about the scale, it's got to be over $100 million.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
We don't know, but yeah, it might be like a Kevin Gausman or a George Springer contract, right?
And then,
but that's just, I'm just speculating.
Of course, we don't know the financials.
And so, I mean, what are materials going to cost at that time, right? Like what type of supply chain issues going to run into? Like you tried to do anything on your place lately, like, and talk to a contractor, like materials, man.
Yeah.
Stuff's expensive right now.
That's
our producer Amal will know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Amal knows. So, all right. So that's going to be, it's some large amount of money. Can't pinpoint it, pending supply chain issues. It'll be a lot. And then after that, there's going to be still a push, or based on what Shapiro has said, to create some other stadium. Yeah. Based on what he's saying. So it's not that Rogers Center is like this permanent home for the Blue Jays for, decades and decades. They still want to create another stadium.
He would call it like a 10 to 15 year runway, quote unquote, to make a decision on what's next. And what's next is either like flattening the Rogers Center, which like, oh my God, the environmental cost to that. 10 to 15 more years of climate change and we're going to dump all that concrete in the ocean is breaking my heart right now if that's where they go. And rebuild on the current footprint, or do you move somewhere else?
Yeah.
Right. So I'd say those are the two options. But yeah, there will be a new stadium after this, 15 to 17 year period, I guess, right? So it's going to take them 2 years to do the renos.
Yeah.
So then you get 10 to 15 years out. I would assume they'll get 15 out of, you're not going to renovate this thing and then like 8 years in, we're done with it. I think they're going to get 15 years out of it.
And you just wonder, because it reminds me of Beeston in the Grass, right? And it's like, and that was a great idea, just never happened. And Mark Shapiro and Paul Beeston.
A great idea.
Well, it was
grow grass without water or light.
Okay, it was
or drainage.
It was an intriguing and fatally flawed idea. I'll rephrase. But
are you like familiar with how organisms work?
Yeah, it would be a challenge. But I think with this one, it's just really tough to say how long it's going to last, because I could imagine a scenario where great, they get these approvals, but like you're saying with supply chain, you need city approvals, funding. It's got to all come together. And so, Rogers Center could be their home for a long time, but I think the hope would be that something would come together. They would be able to have a different home. People
can't grow grass in their backyards. You want to friggin' try to grow grass in a stadium. Anyway, I think part of the reason why this is happening, a new stadium was considered in this round of deliberations. It just became too big of a thing, the scale. It's not the sort of thing where Mark Shapiro can just be like, all right, Marnie Starr come in and, select 2 other sort of business leaders within the front office. This is your project. You're going to work on it. It's not like Buffalo, right? It's not like Salem Field. It's not like updating TD Ballpark. Like, this is a massive thing. It's a thing where you're going to have to hire people. It's like a thing where you're going to have 15, 20 folks working on this for years. It's a really substantial project. So that's far down the line. I think the Blue Jays just kind of punted. But look, it's good for fans that this new stadium is going to arrive. I think it's good for the Blue Jays pocketbooks eventually. This year in general is going to be great for the Blue Jays income-wise.
Massively.
On the heels of 2 years in which, I haven't seen the Blue Jays books, but where was the revenue coming from when you played 80% of your games outside Toronto? And when you were in Toronto, you could only sell 15,000 tickets, except for those final 6 games, that final homestand where you could sell 30,000, right? It's been 30 months since the Blue Jays had more than 30,000 people in their building, Wow. And they haven't played a lot of home games in that time.
Might be more than 30 months when you think about the 2019 season.
Yeah.
How that ended.
So the income taps, the revenue taps are about to open back up in a pretty substantial way. And then you think about the fact that the broadcaster is owned by the same company that owns the team. The Blue Jays are pretty popular right now. Ratings going to be pretty good. Sell more ads, right? You make more revenue from the broadcast, more revenue from probably places like Sportsnet.ca, and
one hopes
that'd be nice. And all kinds of, right? There is all kinds of impacts there, and then also untapped revenue streams. The Blue Jays are going to announce a partnership with a gaming company soon, as this becomes a thing in Ontario, and the Blue Jays are going to have a partnership with that. It's going to be meaningful. That's going to create revenues. The Blue Jays are going to make a lot more money this year. And if after this renovation, which I promise you is going to add way more premium seating to the Rogers Center than there is now.
It always does.
If the Blue Jays are still good and still selling out all the time, they're going to be making way more money out of Rogers Center, generating way more revenue out of game day than they have in the past, even pre-pandemic. And that only is going to help sustain higher payrolls and more spending. So you want to be good, you typically have to spend unless you're the Tampa Bay Rays, right? And the Blue Jays are spending. This year, they're going to have the highest payroll estimated by Roster Resource, but looks like the highest payroll in franchise history.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. And those things, they all connect.
And it's only going to go up.
Yeah.
We talk about Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. extensions. Yeah, 9 figures starts at the 3.
Yeah.
George Springer's contract ain't going away. Kevin Gausman's isn't. And you're going to have to keep paying for more players through free agency. Teoscar Hernandez is going to keep getting more expensive in arbitration. If you don't sign Bo and Vlad to long-term deals, those guys are going to get expensive in arbitration.
Oh, yeah.
Payroll is going to be pretty high for a pretty long time.
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be as they go into this window. All right, Arden, we've covered a lot of ground here. Now, is there anything I'm missing?
Your take on any of that. Your opinion on anything to do with the renovation and how it fits into the grander Blue Jays plans.
I think, I think it makes sense to renovate. I think that, ultimately Rogers Center is not a building that's, it's, they just missed it. The timing wise, if it had come into existence 10 years later, it would be a much more modern facility. It would be more of that ballpark feel. The reality is it's a very I'm sure everyone listening has watched tons of games there, probably been to a lot of games there. And it's really functional, but it doesn't really bring you a lot of ambiance. I'm not convinced that this renovation is going to change that. I would love to be wrong. I would love to be wrong and to see, in 2 or 3 years' time, walk in there and just have this feeling that you're in Camden Yards or you're at, AT&T Park or whatever they're calling the one in San Francisco,
It's never going to be that.
It's not.
It'll never be that.
It's not. So
That's completely unrealistic.
yeah. And so, what they do is they kind of sustain what it is and they keep it viable, and, it'll fundamentally still be Rogers Center.
That can't be the expectation that it's suddenly going to be PNC. It can't be.
And I
It's
am not,
impossible.
I don't have that expectation. Yeah.
I think it's not as bad as people feel like it is. And I feel like nobody has seen it full and rocking for a good team in a really long time. And I think that on opening night, people are going to be like, oh yeah, this place ain't so bad. Right? Like when it is full and the team's good and the game means something, was anybody complaining about the friggin' Sky Dome in 15 and 16?
Right. I mean, I guess by that definition, though, you could say the same thing about most ballparks, right?
Yeah.
So, if you have a full park and you have a good team, it's going to be a good experience.
But there's not a lot of ballparks where you can create the kind of intensity and energy from the fans than at Rogers Center when you got like 46,000 people. Dude, we were at those games in 15 and 16. People have forgotten like what it was like in the bat flip game.
Oh, yeah.
Like what that atmosphere was like. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
Oh, yeah. It was wild.
It's unbelievable, the
place
energy
was
and atmosphere.
physically shaking. The
Literally.
building was shaking.
The
Like, if
shot of Cole Hamels that's like this. You remember that one? Like,
yeah.
dude, people have just forgotten. It's been a long time, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a recency bias world. I think this year people will remember, like, oh yeah, when this place is full, especially, when it's full, every Canada Day game, even when the team sucks, is great because it's full. It's July 1st. Usually it's sunny day, roof's open. Everybody's in a good mood. Somebody, Edwin Encarnacion hits some meaningless home run. Everybody goes nuts. Like, that's a good time.
Yeah. And look, like I have always enjoyed watching baseball at Rogers Center. There's definitely a place for it. It's very functional. And basically, I think that this renovation will continue to keep it functional. It's not going to change the essence of it.
Yeah. It also fits into like what Mark Shapiro proposed 7 years ago when he took over. 7 years ago now, I guess. I don't know what day it is or who I am, but I think it was 7 years ago. And it was like, look, we are going to modernize this franchise and this organization. It is going to start beneath the surface. He didn't say this. I'm saying this. Fans aren't going to see the first parts. And the first parts are going to be like, let's build out a development department and completely revolutionize the way we develop players in this organization. Let's build out high performance, right? And let's hire like untold amounts of strength and conditioning folks and PTs and massage therapists and mental performance people and all of this, right? Like look at those lists of high performance at each level of the minor leagues. Like they're so long.
Yep.
They've hired so many people, but fans don't get to see that type of stuff. Let's build out analytics, right? Programmers and analysts. Fans don't see those folks. Even the player development complex here in Dunedin, which is spectacular and up and running. No fan is ever going to get to step foot in there or like very seldom will. So fans don't get to like interact with that type of stuff.
Yep.
That was all part of the plan, right? It was layering all that stuff in, building out the farm system, right? Like bringing in, getting a Bo Bichette, getting Alec Manoah, when Alec Manoah was in Vancouver and Bo Bichette was in like Lansing with Jesse Goldberg Strassler, like people didn't see him and interact with those guys and didn't see them up close. Now fans are actually getting to like interact with the plan.
Yeah.
And see like it kind of coming together, and you've had to be patient. And by the way, like a pandemic threw a serious stick in the spokes. And for 2 years, Mark Shapiro became like just pandemic manager of like, where's my team going to play? How am I going to get players in and out of the country? Where are they going to live? What are the governmental restrictions? Like the plan did get delayed a little bit, but it's now coming to fruition where you are seeing like, hey, there is $150 million in center field. And there is a 7-year extension on the mound opening day. And the next day, there's like $131 million free agent deal that Kevin Gausman signed. Hey, there's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. developed internally at first base. There's Bo Bichette, one of the best second shortstops in the game at short, developed internally via this development system, via this drafting, via this commitment to youth, right? Like, and via this commitment to a performance department as well that has helped him get the most out of his body, improve dramatically at shortstop. Like, this is all part of the plan. Mark Shapiro said all these things in 15 and 16 and 17. And I just don't think that fans could like see how they all worked in concert with each other and like what it all meant. And now you are. And the renovation is another part of that. Mark Shapiro has been talking about renovating Rogers Center forever. And that is part of increasing revenues in order to sustain the high payrolls and keep spending money on all those folks you don't see. Keep spending money on, like, at the PDC, the, friggin' racks of protein powders and the big, like, rooms full of, nameless, faceless nerds studying spreadsheets, and all the performance people who you'll see in the PDC who are in there helping players, like, continuing to spend money on all those things and payroll and development, and like it does all come in concert together. And I think fans are starting to see it. And ultimately, the goal is for that all to produce championships. It hasn't yet, but Blue Jays are positioned pretty well to challenge for one this year.
They certainly are. Yeah, I think, when you look at the roster, great roster, and I think the end point as well of that process is the stadium too for a lot of fans, right? Because they make that trip in, whether it's just down the subway or they're coming in from out of town. That's the end point for them. So you want to make sure that that is a really good place to be. Hopefully, there's great food, great drinks, great chances for people to experience the history of the team and celebrate that.
You don't see how this is coming together, like kind of like.
I am not saying otherwise.
Yeah,
at all. I'm not saying otherwise.
The idea of building a sustainable winner, like, it is coming together.
I in no way.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do a whole podcast series on that. Maybe we should, but I in no way
write that down. Almost, yeah,
almost on. Like in no way. Of course,
right?
To oppose that would be
to have internally coming up from your development system, your minor league system, constant upward pressure on the roster of young, good players that you've invested in via international market, good scouting, good drafting, good developing, like helping players make big jumps in velocity and stuff and all that, like when they get into your system, that upward pressure while going out and getting a Gosman and a Springer and a Ryu, right? Like,
it's honestly, like, it's a great time for the Toronto Blue Jays. It's a great time. It is. And it's also spring, and so there's so much more work to do. I think that's what maybe if I'm like
the pitching coach got arrested, but other than that, like, it's pretty good time for the Blue Jays.
Yeah, and he's one person in a big organization. To me, it's like, and that's a serious thing. But to me, it's of course, this franchise, and we've said it, in various forms. Like, to put it very concisely, like, this franchise is on the rise. They're better positioned than almost everyone except for the Dodgers. There's not a long list.
Doesn't it sound like a mini Dodgers kind of, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the Dodgers will spend to like 250, 270, right? And like, obviously their market's enormous, although I don't know.
And the Dodgers have won a World Series and they've won 8 consecutive NL West. So it's a different
their development system's more proven, as are their analysts, right? Like, they're all, I bet you they have more robust resources. Like,
and they have an iconic stadium that's beyond Rogers Center. Like, it's,
but don't the Blue Jays sound like a little bit, they're turning into a little bit of a mini Dodgers? They just haven't won yet, but like that, they are getting there.
They're taking steps in that direction. They're taking meaningful steps in that direction.
Because I don't think the Blue Jays are ever going to spend $200 million on payroll, but they might spend 180, 190.
They might spend 200. Yeah. They might spend more. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the limits are, but I think unless there's anything more, I think we can leave it there. It's been good talking some baseball. It's been great.
Poor Nick and Amel who had to put this together.
Nick and Amel, thank you both for your help putting this together. Nick Andrade, Amel Delich here with us in Florida. Arden and I shaking off the rust. 2 years here since we recorded a podcast in person. It was great to get one in the books. And we will be back at you all very soon with more At the Letters.